Hey everybody, welcome to First and Goal for Week 8. Week 8 already, almost halfway through the NFL season. I can't believe it. But once again, welcome back to First and Goal, as always, presented by Rosters.com. If you haven't tried Rosters yet, be sure to head over and try promo code CURVE for an instant $20 bonus. Instant, not a slow drip. An instant $20 bonus on your initial $10 deposit. So deposit $10, end up with $30. You can't beat that. Now, for those of you that have tuned in before, and for those of you that haven't, welcome. What we like to do each week here on First and Goals, we like to talk about the week that was, the week before. We're going to be talking about Week 7 this week. A lot of great stuff happened. And then we're going to go into each game and give our initial thoughts. On Tuesdays, there is a lot of stuff that can happen. Basically, we know practice on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday means a lot. But the first thoughts are usually the gut feelings, usually the things we know based on our anecdotal research that you want to learn. So this is one of those things that kind of gets us ready. I know Adam and I talk each and every week. After this show, we always have a good sense of Week 8 and or the week that was. And for this week, it's going to be Week 8. And I can't wait to dive into it because there's 10 games this week on the main slate, 13 games in total. We do have a London game on Sunday morning, Thursday night football, of course, and Monday night football between the Minnesota Vikings at the Chicago Bears. So we will dive into that. But first things first, let's talk about Week 7. It was a chalky week. And what I mean by that is to chalk basically are players that are very highly owned and for good reason most of the time in DFS. And the chalk hit everywhere. The top performers were Drew Brees, Melvin Gordon, Matt Forte, who was a little bit lower owned, but receivers, A.J. Green, Mike Evans, T.Y. Hilton. All of them were relatively highly owned in cash. And, of course, Jack Doyle, a tight end, who was the highest owned player, tight end at that position, was the number one tight end in fantasy. So it was a very high-scoring week. We will talk about that. But, Adam, I just want to hear your thoughts real quick on Week 7, starting with quarterback. Andrew Luck, quarterback 1 at under 2% owned. How did that happen?
Because people are stupid. No, I'm obviously kidding, but so Andrew Luck is this guy that has you either love him or you hate him, and that alone makes him interesting in tournaments every week. And I've pretty much had Luck as a tournament guy almost every week because there's always these things that going against him. The receivers are banged up, the offensive line is terrible. He turns the ball over. But some of that can translate into great GBP plays. The team's terrible. The defense is terrible. He's throwing the ball a lot. High trail rate. Always behind the games. And, I just looked at this game as they weren't going to be able to run the ball between the tackles very well. And, the way you pick on this Tennessee defense is through the air. And, I mean, Luck and T.Y. are always under-owned. And it's just they always connect on at least a 30-yard touchdown almost every week. So, it might be the same this week, too. I don't know if people are going to be higher on Luck than they were the last couple weeks, but I'm going to have some Luck exposure again.
Sorry about that. I had a little bit of a microphone issues. Exactly. We talked about the fact that last Friday on RC Live that when we saw Andrew Luck's ownership percentage in the Thursday to Monday slate on Fantasy Aces, he was just way, way, way too loaned. We talked about stacking him with T.Y. Hilton and Jack Doyle, and I know you did that in a few lineups, Adam. And it turned into a lot of points at a very low ownership. So we will want to keep an eye on that again this week against Kansas City. We will talk about that later. Running backs. I know 2 weeks ago we talked about how Arian Foster and Jay Ajayi were in a split. Last week we saw Jay Ajayi go crazy. This week he did it again and Arian Foster retired. So I guess we know where the direction of this backfield is headed. It's going to be all the Ajayi all the time for the rest of the season. Do you like Ajayi going forward?
Yeah, it's funny because the last 2 weeks I had no interest in him. Obviously, nobody really was on him in the Pittsburgh game when he really broke out. And then Buffalo's run defense has been really, really strong. I didn't think Miami would be able to run the ball well, but sometimes these players come out and they're matchup proof. And right now, Jay Ajayi looks legit. I really liked him coming out of college at Boise State. He was really, really good. His footwork, if you watch his footwork, he's super, super talented in the way he moves his feet and kind of weaves in and out. Dude used to play soccer a lot, so but yeah, he fell in the draft because of longevity concerns with his knee. People weren't sure how long he'd play, not because of talent, and we're kind of seeing that now. He forced 10 missed tackles last week. Dude has been just unbelievable. And Buffalo's a pretty solid tackling team. I mean, Zach Brown and Lorenzo Alexander and these guys have been playing really well. So he's been incredible. He leads the NFL in terms of, according to Pro Football Focus, in yards after contact per rush. Over 4 yards per after contact per rush for JHI right now. He looks legit. Obviously, he's on a bye this week, but even before the last 2 weeks, Adam Gase was saying how he kind of wanted to have one running back get in rhythm for Miami. And then, obviously, the last 2 weeks, it's clearly been JHI. Aaron Foster suddenly retired, which was a little surprising still. But yeah, like JHI is looking like he's going to be that breakout player, that Alfred Morris, that Devontae Freeman of 2016.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited to see him take this role because, like you said, a lot of us liked him coming out of college at Boise State. You mentioned the footwork, and he's a really big back considering how nimble he is on his feet. He's got some speed as well. His only issues, like you said, were the knee concerns and the issues he had controlling the football, which he seems to, knock on wood, have fixed so far. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that moving forward. At wide receiver last week, we saw basically every top play hit. Julio Jones, we know, is excellent. Mike Evans, excellent. A.J. Green, excellent. T.Y. Hilton was good as well, despite the lower than expected ownership percentage. The problem is some wide receivers that other people really like, maybe myself. Sorry, Brandon Marshall.
I liked him too, man.
Allen Robinson, not a good week. So the problem is all those receivers hit, but if you had one or two guys that missed their receiver, it was a tough one. Did you notice anything else at wide receiver this week?
Yeah, so Allen Robinson, we thought this was going to be the spot. It wasn't. So this is a thing that actually happened in Week 7 of the NFL season. Allen Robinson had 2 catches for 9 yards. Taylor Lewan had 1 catch for 10 yards and a touchdown. For those of you who don't follow football that closely, Taylor Lewan plays offensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans. So that right there is kind of showing what it's been like for Allen Robinson owners this season. But yeah, the chalk hit. Mike Evans was great as expected. Julio was great without scoring. AJ Green went off as expected. Didn't see it going the way it did in terms of the Hail Mary, but we target Cleveland because they're so bad, and it's pretty evidence right there how bad they are. They let one dude like tip the ball to himself 4 different times, surrounded by 5 defenders, and still make the catch. But yeah, other than that, the thing that really stuck out to me was Michael Thomas of the Saints might be creeping in on their number 1 receiver, and it's hard to say that because the Saints don't really have a number 1 receiver. Their targets are really spread out. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Saints game, but getting harder and harder to project who's going to get the touchdowns because we know Brees is going to throw them, especially at home, but it's getting really hard to project who's going to be reaping the benefits each week.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that we talked about for a while with Brees is in the last few years, everyone was worried about losing some weapons with Colston retiring and Jimmy Graham being traded.
This is his best group of weapons in his career.
I agree. Yeah, I was just going to say, this is with Cooks, with Michael Thomas. Snead is a very good third down receiver, and we see that he's very
Snead's probably the most underrated receiver in the NFL. Like, he's really good. He doesn't drop anything.
He's up there. And yeah, a rookie like Michael Thomas in this offense, having to know all those routes, everybody's seen how many plays that Sean Payton has on that play sheet. So it's very interesting to see this offense. And honestly, it's one reason why Drew Brees has had back-to-back top 2 quarterback weeks.
Yeah. And like sometimes Drew Brees, like I almost wrote up Drew Brees this week, even though he's on the road, because sometimes the home road splits with Brees and Roethlisberger and these guys are legit, but sometimes you kind of have to throw it out the window when you're facing like pressure is huge for quarterbacks, and the Chiefs just don't generate pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a little bit of a cliffhanger there because I know we both want to talk about the Chiefs' lack of pressure later in the show.
Yeah.
Now, just real quick before we move on to the next section here, tight ends. Everyone knew Jack Doyle was going to have a good game at minimum price, but I don't know if everybody knew he was going to catch 6 balls in the fourth quarter. I believe he had 5 or 6 catches in the fourth quarter, over 60 yards. He had that touchdown late in the game, but at min price, you almost couldn't go wrong with one of the top targets in the Colts offense last week.
I don't think I ever fist pumped as hard as at a tight end touchdown that wasn't Rob Gronkowski or Jordan Reed than that Jack Doyle touchdown. But yeah, like Dwayne Allen's probably going to miss the next game, high ankle sprain, and Andrew Luck is targeting the tight end position around 23% of the time right now. So like the targets were going to be there, especially with Dorsett and Moncrief banged up, and The Chiefs have been pretty good against tight ends, but like if he's going to be the number 2 option in this passing offense and an offense that throws the ball a ton, then I'm probably going to keep playing Jack Doyle. Who's been producing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what it came down to last week when Jordan Reed was out. We said it was either Gronk or
Yeah, like
just
Tennessee,
Ben waiting out.
Tennessee entering the week was really good against tight ends too. It's just when you're the number 2 option in an offense led by Andrew Luck, like you're going to walk in production more times than not.
Yeah, exactly. With targets comes production, especially with a good quarterback like that. So you guys have heard us talk about how last week the chalk hit, the chalk this, the chalk that. I want to kind of take a little bit of time here and kind of talk about why that happens. A lot of newer players will see, oh, you know what? 173 points was needed to cash in DraftKings double ups. That's just way too much. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, Adam, because a lot of people will kind of be discouraged with a high scoring week or encouraged if they had a huge week. But I want to talk about why it doesn't really necessarily matter in terms of finding, hey, I won 120 points. Yes, more often than not, that will gear you towards cashing. But when you look at ownership in NFL DFS, especially now with all the information that's out there, you have to find those top owned guys because, like we talk about all the time, if you're going to get a really cheap player that's going to stick out and perform well, like Jacquizz Rodgers, or like the chalk that is in such a good situation, like AJ Green, it's going to raise those cash lines. Think about it this way. Jacquizz Rodgers was 80% owned in cash games, like he was mostly. He had over 20 fantasy points. That means 80% of players already have those 20 points. So if you're not in there that 80%, you're in that 20. You have a player at similar production and had 1 or 2 fantasy points, like a Gillislee or a Zach Zenner, somebody of that nature. You're already chasing from behind. So Adam, just give your thoughts real quick on how ownership and chalk, when they hit, how it affects the cash lines in DFS.
Yeah, so like in terms of cash, like I don't know, I might be alone on this, but like when I make lineups, I'm just looking for a team that can score the most points. I'm not really looking for 130 points, 100 and whatever points. So, but yeah, like that Jacquizz Rodgers example was pretty good because like if you're chasing from that spot already, like you at least in tournaments, you have to find like the ultimate leverage play, and it's pretty difficult on most slates, especially on a week where the chalk hit like last week. And then like even in cash games, like sometimes you kind of just have to play the chalk because you're blocking, right? You're like 80% of Jacquizz Rodgers, you're playing the block right there if you play Jacquizz Rodgers as well. So yeah, like I don't know for how many weeks we're gonna have like this where the chalk just absolutely hit across the board. Because it happened, week 8 will probably be just all the chalk will fail because that's usually how it works. But yeah, like that's something that I like to do is to try to play for the block and cash when guys are so highly owned, like and in such good spots like Quiz was and Doyle, for instance.
Yeah, let's bring that up. I brought up a cash lineup here from last week on DraftKings. Ready? DeMarco Murray was 72.6% owned on DraftKings, and he scored 25 fantasy points. Mike Evans scored 29.6, and he was 50% owned. And of course, we talked about Jacquizz Rodgers being 80% owned. He scored 20.3 fantasy points. So between those 3 guys right there, that's 70 fantasy points, and everyone's ownership was 50% or higher. So that means everybody, basically, in your entire contest had at least one of those guys. Most people had 3. So you're talking about an absolute floor of 70 fantasy points, not to mention all the other great plays last week. That's why the cash line was risen there. So don't be too discouraged if you didn't necessarily hit. Say you had 150 or 160 this week, but you didn't necessarily hit the cash line because it was so high. Don't worry about that because you definitely did have a good week at 150. You just have to understand at some point that the ownership percentages and the chalk like that, when it hits, it's really going to inflate.
Yeah, for sure. Like 160 on most slates is very, very strong.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even in the contrary of that, too, like you saw Jacquizz Rodgers was 80% owned. Say he had a bad day of just 1 carry for 8 yards or something in point 8. That cash line would have been much lower because 80% of the people had that guy. So you have to just think about it in that nature of the game.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough on that. Hopefully that kind of helped you a little bit, maybe making your lineups and understanding the cash and chalk line, stuff like that. So let's move on to week 8, what everybody's here for. we have a Thursday night game and we have a London game. So, Adam, let's just give your quick thoughts on Thursday night. Jags-Titans. Are you playing the Thursday slate because of this game, or is this game you're staying away from?
I probably should stay away. But like I love playing tournaments and I love buying low on players. So like this is like a dream tournament spot for Allen Robinson. Like you could talk some narrative about how Jacksonville after the game was talking about how their offense and their passing offense needs to get it going. Like Marquise Lee leads the team in receptions right now, which is just ridiculous. But Allen Robinson's been held under 60 yards in 5 consecutive games. He's catching just 47% of his targets. But like I kind of want to play him in tournaments on this Thursday slate because he's going to be low owned. Parrish Cox has been ruled out, I think, already. So that means Robinson will see McCourty, Jason McCourty. I really, really, really have some interest in Robinson just because I'm an idiot and I love buying low on players at low ownership and lower price and especially players that are like Allen Robinson is still a ridiculously good talent. And I'd like to go back and see of all of his targets, how many were deemed catchable from Blake Bortles because Bortles has been terrible this year. So yeah, I'm a little interested in that. But other than that, not really. Mariota's been great and he's my guy, but Jacksonville's not really giving up a lot of big games in terms of quarterbacks and especially in terms of yardage. And we know Mariota's not going to throw for 300 yards, especially with DeMarco Murray getting the ball 25 times a game. So, yeah, that's kind of like the only thing that I'm interested in because like you would think on a Thursday night game when nobody's going to care about him or be talking about him, this is the week Robinson goes off just because that's how it works.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think at some point he will break out, but like you said, 5 straight game of 60 yards or below, it's not efficient at all, and that's essentially what the problem with the Jacksonville offense has been. Bortles not efficient. Allen Robinson targets have not been efficient, and when you have a quarterback and a receiver tandem like that, it's hard to fault Robinson too much because, like you said, if he's been targeted 14 times but only 6 or 7 of them were catchable, that's on Bortles. And you really have to take a look at quarterbacks in DFS.
I think he had 3 drops last week, but like still, like if you watched even like the week 1 game, Bortles they were going against the Packers and Robinson was covered by Demarius Randall a lot, and like Bortles would be giving him like he would have to like extend his body and make very difficult catches. So I wonder if I went back and watched if there was like a similar situation as that.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that because, like you said, if the balls weren't catchable, there's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah.
Now, is there anything else in this game? Because, like you said, it's just Robinson, maybe DeMarco Murray if you're playing in cash games, but I think there's other options that you can use if you wanted to play in these Thursday slates. Completely fade this game. The problem is with the situations of just DeMarco Murray. If he has a great game, then you're on the bottom looking up. So, what are you thinking from that side of it?
Yeah, I don't hate DeMarco. He's been so good and so much volume. But other than that, like I don't really have interest in anybody else. I'm not touching Bortles. Nobody other than Delaney Walker's interesting on the Tennessee passing game, and I just I'm not interested really in anybody else. But Bortles is probably gonna go nuts. And nobody's gonna be on him. So I kind of like being in that spot where I love playing a guy until he has that breakout game. I did it with Odell Beckham 2 weeks ago against the Ravens. So maybe I'll keep doing it with A-Rob.
Yeah, it might be worth a shot because you know that big game is coming. This next game we have here is London again. Seems like we have a London game every week right now.
They need to chill with this, man. They need to chill.
Yeah. Soon before too long, if the Jaguars can't throw the ball anymore, they might be the London Jaguars. So hopefully
they might have better luck in London.
Yeah, I mean they might because everybody's behind them when they get there. Sometimes Jacksonville have a hard time filling the stadium with all the other things and attractions down there. But
if they didn't have that London, pool in Jacksonville, they'd have no fans.
Well, it's weird.
I don't know why I'm talking. I'm a Bills fan. Like we haven't made the playoffs since 1999.
Well, if you think about it, though, like in Jacksonville, there's a lot of retirement communities, so people move down there from other places. So yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, those Jaguars aren't in London this week.
Yeah,
the Bengals and the Redskins are in London now. For me, maybe Jeremy Hill or Gio Bernard, but they could be splitting carries again.
Well, we
I'm
got to
just
keep
kind
an eye on this
of
because
the whole game.
Jeremy Hill had, 9 carries last week and went
Yep.
nuts. He had a 20-yard run at one point in the fourth quarter and then was seen holding that shoulder area again, which he's been battling the last couple weeks. I haven't seen an update on him. I'm going to check RotoWorld right now, but, like, if he's out, like, you have to remember, like, they leave for London, on Thursday, I believe?
Yeah, so they
Thursday
have to
night?
make that decision early.
Yeah, it's like, so if there was a situation where he doesn't he doesn't get on the plane, then obviously he's not playing. So, but still, even so, like even with Hill active last week, Gio Bernard has been dominating the workload. He's got 41 carries to Jeremy Hill's 26 over the last 3 weeks. During that span, he's outsnapped him 131 to 57. Both guys scored last week. Gio actually had his highest carries and yardage totals of the year, and he gets another good matchup. Browns allowing 100 or Redskins allowing 120 yards per game on the ground, 1.3 rushing touchdowns per game. It's the third most in the league. And like Gio's a slippery guy, can avoid and evade defenders. And the Redskins, if you watch, are just so bad at tackling. So this could be a good spot for Gio, especially if Hill's out. And then Josh Norman might not play as well. He on a Marvin Jones bomb. Marvin Jones, by the way, sunned Josh Norman on this play. It was like a 51-yard catch. Norman landed on his shoulder and his head area. I think he was evaluated for a concussion. They said if they don't get word on him by Thursday, he's probably not going to make the trip and he won't play. So AJ Green, the guy he's in play almost every week because any guy as talented as AJ Green that's seeing 29% market share are always in play. Dude leads the league in receptions, second receiving yards. And again, if Norman's not in there, we could see Breeland against AJ Green. And Breeland has struggled against number one receivers this year. Breeland's a good corner, but Antonio Brown roasted him on Thursday night. Des Bryant roasted him. So he's struggling against number one guys. It'll be a lot different than it would be with Josh Norman.
Yeah, like you said there, this is one of those games where you have to keep an eye on the news because Gio Bernard's in play, of course. If Jeremy Hill is out, even if he's not out, it might be an interesting play. And AJ Green with Josh Norman if he doesn't make the trip. So be sure to keep an eye on the news there. Thursday, the flight leaves, and it's a long one, so they're not going to take everybody.
Yeah.
The one way that I look at this, if you are playing the full slate, Thursday through Monday, Thursday through Sunday, don't necessarily take too many guys from either one of those games just because they are active. Like Adam said, you just want to get the best plays in that game. So if you want DeMarco Murray and AJ Green in your lineups this week, that's the slate to play, and you don't really have to charge in terms of getting anything else from the rest of those games. So, like you said, if Norman's out, I'm on AJ Green as well. But for these two games, I'm not quite sure if they're worth playing the entire slate for, rather than just focusing on the main one.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Anybody on the Washington side? I'm not really into Kirk Cousins. Definitely not interested in the running game. Matt Jones fumbled twice last week, and
yeah, they still brought him in that goal line. That when at least they threw the ball to Rob Kelly, but
yeah,
the fumble.
He was. They had both of them in the game. They had, I think it was Matt Jones as fullback, and Kelly was the tailback.
Yeah, it was vice versa. But yeah, either way.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they didn't give him the ball. So, and we saw a lot of Chris Thompson. Maybe Chris Thompson will be interesting. The pass catching running back against the Bengals have had a lot of success this season. So maybe Chris Thompson will be a thing, but I'm not playing the London game to play Chris Thompson most likely. So
exactly.
They got to be in an elite spot with elite usage, and that's not the case with Thompson. Then the receivers, I don't think Jordan Reed's been cleared to practice for Wednesday, but they have a bye next week. I would be shocked if Jordan Reed played. Would you?
I'm saying I read that he has to be cleared by an independent neurologist as well. I'm not sure if he's past that step. So, like you said, for a guy that's nursing back from a concussion, a 8 or 9 hour flight in altitude like that, I'm not sure they're going to risk it considering they have that bye next week, as you said.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if Reed played, and that's the case then. Yeah, I'm not too interested in the Washington guys.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely 100% there. All right, let's move on to the main slate here. This is basically the shortest slate we've had so far this season in terms of being a main slate. There's only 10 games. Now, there is still plenty of plays to choose from, so do not let that just kind of stray you from the main slate here. The first game, Green Bay at Atlanta. This may be one of the most fun games of all season in terms of DFS. The over-under right now is the highest of the week by far. It's currently at 52. Green Bay could possibly be without their top 3 corners, not just their 1, not just their 2, but all 3 of those guys could be out. Julio Jones at home in the Dome, Matt Ryan at home. This could be a ton of fun. What do you think about this game, Adam?
Yeah, so you have 52, 53-point total, and you have two of the top three offenses in the league in terms of red zone scoring attempts per game. Both these teams are averaging at least 4 red zone scoring attempts per game. So a lot of points should be scored in this game. Both quarterbacks absolutely in play. Matt Ryan, a guy I was off heading into the year. There just wasn't upside Matt Ryan heading into the year. 18 of his last 32 games prior to the season, he had 1 touchdown or fewer. This year, he's got multiple touchdown passes in 5 of 7 games. Just an NFL record for consecutive games with 200 passing yards at 46. And in this style of offense and with what Atlanta's doing, 200 yards should be like – he could get 200 yards and a half most games. They're entering the season, Dan Quinn and Matt Ryan talked about, and Kyle Shanahan talked about, they were going to take a lot more deep shots down the field, and it's been certainly evident. Ryan leads the NFL in passing attempts traveling 20 yards and 40 yards. So there's been a lot of upside. He also is second in the league in yards per pass attempt. Like you talked about, Green Bay is extremely banged up at corner. The way you beat them is through the air. 83% of the touchdowns allowed by the Packers this season have come through the air. That's the second highest rate in the league behind only Detroit. So good spot for Matt Ryan at home, coming off, 3 straight losses now for Atlanta? Or 2 straight losses. They were 4-1. So, yeah, I like Matt Ryan. Really like Devontae Freeman. Tevin Coleman, their report came out that he's probably going to miss this game with the hamstring. So, like, if this was last season, right, Devontae Freeman at his price at, what is he on DraftKings? 6,500, even against the most elite defense in the NFL, would still be in play at that price because he was so good last year. Now he has that, like, he was already getting at least 15 touches in every game with Tevin Coleman active. His 47.6 touch percentage, which you can find on RotoCurve, the snaps and the snaps per game and the running back numbers. It's 8th in the NFL, despite being in a little bit of a split. Now Tevin Coleman, like I said, not going to play most likely. Freeman's 5th in the NFL in red zone targets. And I love Devontae Freeman in this spot. I'm going to have so much of him. I know Green Bay's run defense has been very good, but we saw last week what a very good offensive line can do for the running back against Green Bay. Ezekiel Elliott ran all over them. Atlanta's offensive line is not as good as Dallas's, but it's very good. According to Pro Football Focus, Atlanta's creating 2.4 yards before contact per rush attempt, second to only the Buffalo Bills. Alex Mack and Andy Levitre played very well. Freeman's going to be involved. Going to see 20 touches in this game assuming Coleman's out. And in this game, I'm not going to ignore that. I don't care about the matchup. Freeman's really good. He's 8th in the NFL in rushing despite ranking 13th in carries. His 4.8 yards per carry is 10th in the NFL. You can stop me anytime. I love Devontae Freeman. I don't care about the matchup.
Yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of people may stay away from him just based on that matchup. But like you said, Adam, all those factors going in his way, even with Tevin Coleman, and that's a key factor this week. Tevin Coleman probably not going to play. It just makes him that much more of a play.
You got to think about it like this. Like, if this was last season, you would be playing Devontae Freeman at 6,500 no matter what.
No matter what.
So he's been incredible.
2,000 Ravens, doesn't matter.
He's been he's been really good this season too. Like on a per carry basis in the red zone, yards after he's been good. And now he has that number one full workload back that we saw last season when he was the number one running back in fantasy. And the Falcons offense is better this year than it was last year. So Freeman's in a great spot despite the matchup. And then Julio, obviously. If they're without all 3 of their corners, it's an elite matchup. If they're with 2 of their corners, it's still a great matchup. So, he's gone for 100 yards in 4 of 7 games this season, and he's done it in the first half in every single game. So, he's getting a lot of big plays here. I talked about the deep shots Ryan's taking. If the season ended today, Julio Jones' 20.8 yards per catch would be second in the history of the NFL. Dude's almost a lock for the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings, which is very, very, very – I won't say important, but it's very, something we like to get. It's a bonus. I love Julio. He's averaging 97.7 yards per game in his career. That's also second in the history of the NFL. So he should eat in this spot. And then tight end is interesting. Jacob Tamme is second in the NFL in red zone targets behind Brandon Marshall and Sanders, who both have 12. The only knock on Julio, I guess, is that if you look at the Falcons' red zone distribution in terms of targets, It goes Jacob Tamme with 11, Devontae Freeman with 10, Mohamed Sanu with 8, Julio Jones has 3. So like when they get in the red zone, they run these like short little out routes, and you saw it with Tamme 2 weeks ago when he scored. Or no, was it? No, it was last week he scored against the Chargers. So like I think that Tammy's interesting. If you're looking for, like, if you're not paying up a tight end, you're kind of looking for just a touchdown, right? Like, so like in a good offense that's averaging 4 red zone trips per game, Tammy is getting the red zone looks, and even and that kind of goes to Devontae Freeman, because even if you're worried about his rushing numbers, he's like let me check. He is so Jacob Tamme leads the NFL in red zone receptions with 7. Devontae Freeman has 6. So like they use those little short intermediate routes instead of throwing fades and whatnot to Julio. So they're interesting.
It is interesting because, Adam, I know we've talked before about how Matt Ryan struggled in the red zone so much over his career, especially last year.
Yeah.
Now with Julio Jones, just 3 red zone targets. It doesn't make much sense, but the numbers are there. We have a 7-game sample size so far now for the Atlanta Falcons. So that this happens. This happens a lot, like you said, with Jacob Tamme getting all those red zone receptions, with Devonta Freeman having all those red zone targets. Julio Jones only has 3. So for me, all those numbers you mentioned, that just makes Matt Ryan my favorite quarterback player the entire week, really. I mean, at home, we know his history there. Green Bay's without all of their corners. You beat them through the air. And I could see the Falcons throwing the ball to run, which means little short dump offs, little flare routes to Devonta Freeman. We know these Green Bay linebackers can't cover very well. So I think it's just literally a perfect matchup for this Atlanta offense. And with the Green Bay offense on the other side, it's not like they're going to blow the Packers out, because the Packers offense did look good last week.
Yeah, it looked good. Didn't look explosive though. I think there's a difference. Like, so Aaron Rodgers is averaging 6.3 yards per attempt. That's the lowest of his career. Like, they're just not taking shots. Jordy Nelson right now is struggling to separate, which is a little concerning. We'll see if he can get some separation against Trufant. I almost said Marcus again, by the way. I didn't. But yeah, I like Rodgers in this spot. If they continue to not have a presence in the running game, he's going to throw the ball 45 times again. And Atlanta is one of 7 teams to allow over 2 passing touchdowns per game. They allow the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So Rodgers is in a good spot. Then of course we got to talk about Ty Montgomery. Dude is 5,300 on DraftKings, 26 touches over the last 2 weeks, 20 catches on 25 targets. And because Green Bay's not taking those shots on the field and Rodgers averaging under 6.5 yards per attempt, a lot of that is dinking and dunking to Ty Montgomery out of the backfield and in the slot and whatnot. So he's absolutely in play, especially him and Randall Cobb should be in great spots against Atlanta's really weak linebacking core. So I really like both those guys. Cobb has seen 37 targets over the last 3 weeks, also getting some carries. He had 5 last week on the ground, double-digit targets in each of his last 3 games. So I really think right now Cobb and Montgomery have to be looked at as the preferred plays over Jordy Nelson. I still think Jordy's in play, but I mean, all of a sudden now Devontae Adams is a thing. He had a career game last week, and Rodgers is kind of splitting it around in the red zone. I think Jordy has 9 in red zone targets. Montgomery and Cobb have 8, and Adams has 7 or 6. So, it's kind of hard to. I know Jordy is usually the preferred guy in the red zone, but I don't know. I think he's like the 3rd option in terms of who I like most, especially with the price included in terms of the Green Bay wide receivers. Yeah,
Montgomery is one of my favorite plays again this week. On FanDuel, though, he is at running back.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring it up. He's running back on FanDuel now, and he's also, for you seasonal people, he's a running back and a receiver on ESPN, which is like that's massive, like for seasonal, like to have him at running back and receiver. That's huge.
I haven't seen anything like that in a while, too. So it'll be one of the first of its kind. But yes, in terms of DFS, he is a running back on FanDuel. I will not be using him there at his price. The PPR upside is not as high, which is half point over on FanDuel. But 5,300 wide receiver, I'm definitely going to be in on that. Like you said, Atlanta's linebackers do struggle. Montgomery's going to play a lot of snaps as the pass catching back, John Jackson got banged up again last week as well, so we could see well over 50 snaps. So
and
I
he's
just think
getting getting short yardage work too. So like,
yes, you saw in the end zone, he could have 3 touchdowns last week.
yeah. So like
Yeah,
he's like, I think he has
fit.
like a stupid floor right now.
Yes, it's just 53. I think his price right now should be around 62. You base on the touches he should get. So 5,300 right now in DraftKings is definitely a discount for me. Almost 23 fantasy points last week in PPR, and he didn't score those 3 touchdowns, which he easily could have. So I definitely think he's in play this week in this game, without a doubt.
Yeah.
The next game here, I know there's a lot of plays in that game, but it is going to be the game, the target of the week. This next one is a divisional matchup in the same division as the Detroit Lions. They take on the Houston Texans, which Brock Osweiler stinks, Adam. He was awful last night. Now, I know
he's not good.
He did play a good defense, and he played a good defense 2 weeks ago before that too. But the guy averaged 3.1 yards per attempt, just 2.5 yards less than what the Texans were averaging on the ground. That's awful. I can't play anybody on this Houston offense except for maybe Lamar Miller. But we saw Lamar Miller get, I don't want to say bench, but he was being rested a lot last night. So Lamar Miller for me would be the only play on Houston. I can't even play Hopkins now with the fact that Brock Osweiler can't throw a bowling ball through a piece of drywall right now.
Yeah, so Lamar Miller injured his shoulder and was kind of in and out of the game. So he and Alfred Blue both saw 11 carries. Yeah, it's really tough to see what's going to happen. Like, I don't like Alfred Blue's been kind of efficient on his on a limited role this season. So like, we'll have to see practice reports throughout the week. But if Lamar Miller is 100%, I'll be fine with rolling him out there against Detroit. They've been bad against the run, 4.7 yards per carry. Houston still with Bill O'Brien running a lot of plays. They're 7th in plays per game. Miller seeing just under 20 carries per game. But if he's out, like the Texans are still going to run the ball. They did it with when Foster was hurt in the years past. Like when Foster was out, they would still like give Alfred Blue like 20 carries in games. So he would become a nice value play if we get any like setback or something with Lamar Miller, which doesn't seem likely because he didn't leave the game. I kind of like Hopkins in this spot in tournaments. I talk about it with buying low. People are going to be off him because Osweiler's been so bad and Hopkins has been underperforming and he's priced awkwardly. So he's like an awesome tournament play. He saw 12 targets last night. And Houston's had tough matchups this season. They played Minnesota. Kansas City's not a great matchup, not a bad matchup. Denver's a bad matchup. So like they haven't had to walk in the park. And now they get an awesome spot against Detroit, who's allowed 18 passing touchdowns this season, 9th most fantasy points to receivers, allowing a touchdown on 78% of the red zone attempts, the highest in the league. Just under 8 yards per attempt. So Hopkins and Fuller are both kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to disagree on Hopkins because I know he's gonna be low owned. I know he's gonna be in that tournament action.
Dude, Osweiler sucks. Like if he was just bad, like I would love Hopkins. Here's sucks. If he was like bad, I'd be more interested in Hopkins. But
if he was average, Hopkins would have 9,000 yards this year.
I remember talking about in the preseason, like myself included. I was like, "Oh, nice." So Hopkins did it with Hoyer. You can definitely do it with Osweiler.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like it's vice versa now.
My man is. I'm gonna start calling him Brick Osweiler.
Brick Osweiler. Brock Osweiler. What do you like?
Yeah, he's the worst. If you're looking for a cheap tight end, CJ Fedorowicz is interesting.
Yep. Absolutely.
So last year we couldn't even like think of tight ends with Houston. They were not involved at all. Saw under 10% of the team targets. This year it's at 21%. Fedorowicz has been kind of sneaky decent this season and hashtag tight ends against the Lions. 7 tight end touchdowns allowed this year from Detroit. 18 over the last 23 games they've allowed. So Fedorowicz, especially we talk about how bad they are in the red zone, Detroit being their defense. Again, if you're looking for a touchdown, Fedorowicz 2,800 on DraftKings. Could definitely score in this spot. And Detroit doesn't even know when DeAndre Levy's going to be back. So,
yeah, it's not a great defense over there. Like you said, Fedorowicz is very cheap.
They're the Brock Osweiler defenses.
Yeah. It's just I'm thinking maybe if Osweiler misses Hopkins across the middle and it lands in Fedorowicz's hands, that's
that's Kobe Fleener's job. He always does that. He always steals people's touchdowns. It was great. Caught a 50-yard touchdown 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, caught a 50-yard touchdown that was intended for Snead, and he just stole it and then took off. It was incredible because I had Fleener that week and seasonal, and yeah, that was the same week he had a rushing touchdown. So you
Yeah.
could say my opponent was really tilted.
Do you like anybody on the Detroit side?
Stafford's interesting in tournaments, like kind of like luck because nobody's ever on him. The Houston secondary is banged up right now, and they're second pass defense. So I think people are going to be off Stafford. So I don't hate him. Not my favorite play. I don't, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I could play Marv, dude. His targets have been down. Oh man, his price dropped to 6,600 though.
I can see it in your eyes. You want to do it. You want to do it bad.
He only caught 4 passes, but he had 94 yards because he's so good, and he's so good, and he sunned the hell out of Josh Norman. Yeah, I'm playing Marv. I'm playing Marv.
I'm actually going to be off of this Detroit offense this week. I think
the running backs are in such a good spot, but we don't know what the hell's going to happen.
I was just going to say that. I think that Riddick would be in a good spot, but he's not healthy.
Washington should be back too. Like
Washington's back. They still have Forsett. Zenner had some carries and a touchdown last week.
I wouldn't be surprised if Forsett got cut if both those backs are.
He should, and then he'll sign with another team. We'll see if he can make it through 8 teams in 1 year. I think that would be a good record to have.
Yeah, maybe he'll sign with the Bills since the Buffalo just insists on killing McCoy.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Let's jump to that game real quick. Now that you're talking about McCoy, because this is going to be another one of those weeks, McCoy or Gillislee. Now, last week, neither of them were worth using at all. But it's going to be New England. You know New England is focused on stopping that number 1 option for the Bills. But this week, that could be Tyrod Taylor. So I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts on this game. The only thought I have is Rob Gronkowski has 10 touchdowns in 10 games against the Buffalo Bills, including his first 6 in a row. He had 7 touchdowns in those 6 games.
He's got some narrative. He's from around there. He's from around that area.
That's true, too.
So
yeah, give your thoughts on this game because I just like Brady and Gronk, and after that, it's really just kind of moot for me.
Here's my thoughts on this game. Kevin Hogan is more expensive than Tyrod Taylor on DraftKings.
What? Is that real?
You just see me tweeting about that?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Tyrod Taylor's 5,200. Kevin Hogan's 5,300.
I'm gonna have to play Tyrod in a ton of places now.
Tyrod's 5,200 and a game script that should see them throwing. Now the problem is we know what New England does in the narrative of them taking out the number 1 option. If McCoy's healthy, they're going to try to take him out, and then you're left with Marquise Goodwin and maybe Robert Woods if he's healthy. But 5,200 for Tyrod, who, dude, I don't know how many times I have to talk about it, but Tyrod Taylor has given you a very, very safe floor every single week, and he's not even throwing the ball. He's throwing the ball less than 30 times a game. I don't know why people. I know he's not like a tournament guy because of the upside, but he's posted 25.3, 17.3, 16.6, 15.7, 20.9, and 24.3 DraftKings points over his last 6 games, despite averaging under 30 passing attempts per game. He's also he's running the ball a lot, giving you around 40 rushing yards a game. Too cheap. He's too cheap for at 5,200. I'll have some interest in Tyrod, especially at home. We saw it last year. I know Watkins played in that game, but Tyrod had a big game despite having a relatively poor fantasy game because they had to throw a lot. New England got ahead early, and Buffalo almost came back and won. So, yeah, I'm interested in Tyrod. Gronk 2 weeks ago caught a 50-yard touchdown that was intended for Snead, and he just stole it and then took off. It was incredible because I had Fleener that week and seasonal, and yeah, that was the same week he had a rushing touchdown. So you could say my opponent was really tilted.
Do you like anybody on the Detroit side?
Stafford's interesting in tournaments, kind of like luck because nobody's ever on him. The Houston secondary is banged up right now, and they're second pass defense. So I think people are going to be off Stafford. So I don't hate him. Not my favorite play. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I could play Marv, dude. His targets have been down. Oh man, his price dropped to 6,600 though.
I can see it in your eyes. You want to do it. You want to do it bad.
He only caught 4 passes, but he had 94 yards because he's so good, and he's so good, and he sunned the hell out of Josh Norman. Yeah, I'm playing Marv. I'm playing Marv.
I'm actually going to be off of this Detroit offense this week. I think
the running backs are in such a good spot, but we don't know what the hell's going to happen.
I was just going to say that. I think that Riddick would be in a good spot, but he's not healthy.
Washington should be back too.
Washington's back. They still have Forsett. Zenner had some carries and a touchdown last week.
I wouldn't be surprised if Forsett got cut if both those backs are.
He should, and then he'll sign with another team. We'll see if he can make it through 8 teams in 1 year. I think that would be a good record to have.
Yeah, maybe he'll sign with the Bills since the Buffalo just insists on killing McCoy.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Let's jump to that game real quick. Now that you're talking about McCoy, because this is going to be another one of those weeks, McCoy or Gillislee. Now, last week, neither of them were worth using at all. But it's going to be New England. You know New England is focused on stopping that number one option for the Bills. But this week, that could be Tyrod Taylor. So I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts on this game. The only thought I have is Rob Gronkowski has 10 touchdowns in 10 games against the Buffalo Bills, including his first 6 in a row. He had 7 touchdowns in those 6 games.
He's got some narrative. He's from around there. He's from around that area.
That's true, too. So, yeah, give your thoughts on this game because I just like Brady and Gronk. And after that, it's really just kind of moot for me.
Here's my thoughts on this game. Kevin Hogan is more expensive than Tyrod Taylor on DraftKings.
What? Is that real?
You just see me tweeting about that?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Tyrod Taylor's 5,200. Kevin Hogan's 5,300.
I'm gonna have to play Tyrod in a ton of places now.
Tyrod's 5,200 and a game script that should see them throwing. Now the problem is we know what New England does in the narrative of them taking out the number one option. If McCoy's healthy, they're gonna try to take him out, and then you're left with Marquise Goodwin and maybe Robert Woods if he's healthy. But 5,200 for Tyrod, who, dude, I don't know how many times I have to talk about it, but Tyrod Taylor has given you a very, very safe floor every single week, and he's not even throwing the ball. He's throwing the ball less than 30 times a game. I don't know why people. I know he's not like a tournament guy because of the upside, but he's posted 25.3, 17.3, 16.6, 15.7, 20.9, and 24.3 DraftKings points over his last 6 games, despite averaging under 30 passing attempts per game. He's also he's running the ball a lot, giving you around 40 rushing yards a game. Too cheap. He's too cheap for at 5,200. I'll have some interest in Tyrod, especially at home. We saw it last year. I know Watkins played in that game, but Tyrod had a big game despite having a relatively poor fantasy game because they had to throw a lot. New England got ahead early, and Buffalo almost came back and won. So, yeah, I'm interested in Tyrod. Gronk should eat. Absolutely should eat.